Hey, everybody on YouTube. We are going to be talking about how to use YouTube to get traffic to move into your community. Joining me is Mark Beal. I'm Susan Leonardson. And Mark is an expert at using YouTube to do exactly that. So I've invited him on to talk about the strategy he sees working the best to be able to get your videos viewed on YouTube, but also with the most important thing that we want is to actually move people into what we call our nurture space. And I actually don't have a graphic ready. We'll have to probably put one in later when we make this more professional. But if you have like we've talked about the geek linchpin framework, and where this fits in that framework is the nurture space is between your Wild West traffic, which is like YouTube, right? And then you've got to move them into somewhere where you can be nurturing people and then and warming them up to you and getting the know, like, and trust factor. And then from there is when you make offers to them, invite them to your dramatic demonstrations, and inviting them into your continuity programs. So Mark is here to talk about how do we get content out onto YouTube that is bringing the right people in to move them into our nurture space. Real quick before I let Mark talk is when we talk about nurture space, there's basically two options that we propose work best for the people that we work with. Nurture space number one could be a Facebook group. We use Facebook a lot for creating these prospecting groups. And number two, if you're like, I don't want to use Facebook, I don't use Facebook for anything, I don't want to create a group there, it could be just your email list. Your email list, plus maybe a blog, could be where you're nurturing people. So that's kind of all the context of where this fits in. So welcome, Mark. I'm glad you could join me today.
Thanks for having me.
So we were chatting a little bit beforehand, and you were talking about a very specific type of content that you primarily work with for YouTube that is like the most effective for this. So do you want to tell us all about that?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, when it comes to YouTube, there's all kinds of different content and different approaches you can take. And I think in general, when we think of YouTube, we think about like the big people on YouTube, like the big names like Mr. Beast, or one of my favorite YouTubers is Mark Rober with all the science, experiments that he does. But being able to perform at that level and to have channels that are that large and that wide in terms of appeal is really difficult. It takes a lot of work and effort and takes time to be able to get to that. And so I think when it comes to YouTube, though, as it relates to business and business needs and generating leads, the best way and the best approach when it comes to YouTube content is to focus on instead of like interest-based content, which is what I really view those other big channels as people are interested in that content, and focus more on intent-based content, which intent is really getting videos and created content that people are actively searching for. So if you think about like in the old days, I say the old days now, but in the old days, like with blogs and trying to rank with keywords and things like that in order to get on the front page of the Google search results, that's kind of what I mean when it comes to YouTube. You're trying to target those keywords and maybe some of the things that they're looking for, but it's a little bit beyond that. Like I want to focus not only on the things that they're looking for and like actively searching for, but also what problems they're trying to solve. So basically, if you're solving someone's problem, you're building up that know, like, and trust factor with that person. And if you're actually being able to solve that problem, they're going to be more willing to take that next step with you, whether it's, subscribe to your channel or join your email newsletter or join your Facebook community or whatever it is. So the more you can be helpful to someone, the more they're going to be willing to do that. So really, my focus is on those problems and solving those problems for people that are in that space that you're in that you can really help those people with. So yeah, for sure, problem-based content is the key.
Yeah. Well, and we've definitely are in the business of solving people's problems. So it naturally makes sense to like, okay, if your offers are to solve people's problems, then you probably should be putting content out there to solve people's problems, because that's going to be what's attracting people to you to begin with. What about like the I'm gonna maybe get a little specific in my questions here, but just because I know these are questions that are being asked a lot. And so since we have Mark here with us, let's just ask him like some good questions that I think that you're thinking of too. YouTube Shorts is a thing now.
Mhm.
It is kind of growing. I don't know how fast it's growing. You probably know better than I do. I still am a person, if I'm consuming short form content, I primarily go to like Instagram Reels still, and not so much YouTube Shorts. But I
Mhm.
know a lot of people ask us within our community of like, okay, if I'm going to be publishing to YouTube, should I just do long form content, or should I also do short form content, or should I do one versus the other? What are your thoughts on that?
Sure. So when it comes to short form content, I'm kind of like you, right? I like Instagram over YouTube. I think it's just mainly because that's what I'm used to, more than anything. But when it comes to short form content, I really look at it as more of the interest style versus the intent. Because when you're looking for information, you can find short form videos on YouTube. Like you can actually search for keywords and things, and you can find
Mhm.
that short form content. But really, the shorts are designed more for that instant gratification. Like you're interested in this stuff, they know that you're interested in these topics, and so that you're going to see this content scroll across your screen. And it's also, you're in a little bit different mindset when it comes to shorts, because typically when you're looking at shorts or Instagram Reels, you're more looking at being distracted, or just kind of like a quick fix. When it comes to content, you might not have a lot
Yeah.
of time, right? And so it's a little bit different mindset than when it comes to long form content, because you're more focused on solving a problem. You're going to invest a few minutes with this, and the people that are viewing the long form content are in a better position to want to actually take a next step with you, versus just going to the next video and then maybe forgetting all about you because it was only 60 seconds that they had. They may have liked it, they may have maybe actually liked or saved the video, but you're going to have to get in front of them again and again and again in order for them to
Mhm.
actually want to take the next step. So I really see them both playing separate roles. They can kind of intertwine. But to me, the long form content is the best, because once you create a video that's long form content, you have less of this the spiky action. When it comes to like short form content, when you release, you can have a lot of views in the beginning, and it can kind of taper off.
Mhm.
And you can still have that with long form, but I really see it being more of a gradual slope, and it continues to perform over time. Versus the short form content. So it's more of, I like to look at the long form content as more of an asset that you're creating, versus just being, able to get in front of people quickly.
Okay. All right. So with that kind of established of like, okay, if they were really going to play this game of driving people into our community and ultimately driving them into our continuity programs, long form content is the better way to go for like longevity.
Yes.
Um, so, and then we know that that content should be uh, in the problem space. We're solving problems for people. What is your take on like how much do I put into my videos, as far as like how much do I give away of my expertise? Because that's another, I know a lot of people get hung up on that of like, well, I don't want to like teach all of my stuff on YouTube, because then why are they going to buy my thing, right?
Yeah.
I know I have opinions on that. Andrea who's part of Geeks, also has opinions on that. So I'm curious, what are your thoughts on that question from people?
To be honest, I struggle with that a little bit, right? Because it does feel like if you give away everything, then what value are you then at that point, right? But the reality is even if you give away everything, people might your viewers might have an initial problem solved, but there's always going to be additional questions that they have. There might be places where they get hung up, that they need some additional help with, maybe one-on-one or in a group setting, or maybe when you're creating YouTube content, usually it's not going to be like an hour or 2 hour long video where it's like we're covering how to create an entire funnel from A to Z. Well, actually, I don't know if you might have content that's how to create a funnel from A to Z. I'm not sure. But typically with YouTube, you're trying to focus in on like that 5 to 10, maybe 15
Mhm.
minute sweet spot. And there's absolutely no way you can, solve everyone's problems in that one specific, block of time. You can solve a
Yeah.
specific problem in that time. And the other thing too, really, you have to keep in mind is you might be able to give away all of your knowledge, 100% of your knowledge on YouTube in those like 10 to 15 minute chunks, but those are going to be more unstructured, right? So it might not be the path from A to B to C to Z to get the result that you want ultimately. And so someone might be able to get everything that they need from your content, but it's that structure too that really makes a big difference. And that can be a big factor in them wanting to join your communities and actually getting more personalized help.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's pretty much what we in Geek Out subscribe to as well, of like, information is pretty much freely available. You just have to go look for it. If we're not providing it to them, then somebody else is, in their own way, right? Only we're talking about it in the way that we talk about it. But the information is kind of freely out there in some form. But what people really need the help with and what they're willing to pay for is the implementation of that information, because you could give everybody the same steps to go and do, but it's going to get applied to everybody in a slightly different way. So we get that question all the time, and that's really the route that we have chosen to go. And if you go watch through our videos, you'll see like we really don't hold a whole lot back. There's a lot of content in our channel talking about a lot of things, and we're giving away like all of our frameworks and everything, but you don't know how necessarily to go and apply that to your specific situation. Yeah. So I am curious, and then I want to ask maybe a little bit of tactical questions soon. But what are some mistakes that you see new to YouTube people? They're like, okay, I'm gonna go use YouTube, and it's gonna be amazing, and I'm gonna get all these views on my videos, and I'm gonna get all these leads, right? What are the common things that you see going wrong when they're doing that?
Sure. Yeah. I think one of the biggest issues or mistakes that I see is um, maybe people will get to a certain point to where they start creating content, or maybe they're at the point to where they're almost ready to start creating content, and then they stop, right?
Mm,
Because you start to get in your head about like, well, is this the right video that I'm supposed to make? Or what am I supposed to say exactly? Or, like what is it I'm doing, and worried about making mistakes and all these things. And so you can get in your head really, really easily. So my advice in those situations is to just don't worry about it. Just go ahead and press the record button, record your video, put it out on YouTube. Even if it's really, really bad, that's fine. If your content's bad, the reality is that YouTube's not going to promote it. It's not going to be like you're going to put out a bad video and 1 million people is going to view it, right? That's not going to happen. But the advantage you have with YouTube is as you grow over time, as your skills get better and improve, you kind of have this buffer to where you can really hone in those skills. And then as you improve, you're going to get more and more traction when it comes to YouTube. You're going to get more people, more eyeballs on your stuff. And I'd say that's probably the biggest mistake I see everyone make when it comes to YouTube. And I can, even people that are on YouTube quite a bit, there's different levels of that, right? It's like, oh, should I put in this, other B-roll here, or should I have done this transition this way, or all these things, right? So it's kind of the same issue, just in different forms. So, but just be willing to make or take action imperfectly, basically, with that.
Yeah.
And another thing I see people having a mistake with YouTube is buying a lot of equipment that they don't need.
Mhm.
Right. So honestly, you can start creating content with just your cell phone. It's going to be good enough as long as they can hear you and they can see you. That's totally fine. You can buy equipment later on. I mean, I've invested in some nice equipment here. You could probably tell, but you don't have to have that starting out. It's one of those things that you can look at as more of a reward. If you like to geek out over tech stuff like I do, you can make that as a milestone. Maybe once you publish, your first 10 videos or your first 100 videos or whatever, then maybe you can start upgrading your equipment. But it's really about taking that initial action and getting out there to where you can be found.
Yeah. So those two things that you just talked about, of like, one, they start making content and then they stop. And then the second one of like, just don't worry about the hardware, just go do the thing, go make the content. There's a pattern there, which is like, just make content and be consistent with it. And I totally, we are very transparent here at the Geek Out channel, that you're speaking like right to us with that mistake number one, because we are totally guilty of that, of overthinking it, of like, oh, I don't think we have our plan dialed in yet. Okay. And we've skipped weeks in posting videos because of it. We're like, oh, we're still trying to flesh out our plan for our content. We're pretty consistent with going live because that one's easy for us. But you'll notice that we haven't published like pre-recorded, edited content for probably about a month, maybe even longer. I'd have to actually go look, because of that of that exact reason of like, oh, we're not exactly sure how this is going to flow. So the fact that you just gave everybody permission to like just do it, if it's bad or if it doesn't align, like YouTube's gonna know not to push it out to people because it's not gonna be getting the, however the YouTube algorithm works, right? And YouTube uses all kinds of technology to know what your videos are about before it starts pushing it out to people anyway.
Right.
um, yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
And then let's see. The other thing I was gonna say is you had mentioned when you were like, I'm backing up way far. You were talking about like giving too much information and how you shouldn't really worry about that. I think we've kind of established that. But some of our early videos on this channel were like 2 to 3 hours long because we were just hitting live, and that was how long our sessions were. We were just geeking out on ClickFunnels and just talking about it and learning with it. And so that was probably, I mean, that's our first content. We know better now. That's not great YouTube content and that we should make much shorter, 8 to 12-minute videos, 20-minute maybe max. I mean, I'm probably a question we should ask Mark what the recommendation is there. But the point is we started and we started imperfectly.
Yep.
I
That's
was
the
like
goal,
thinking
right?
back to that. I'm like, man, that was not good content for YouTube.
And that's okay. That's totally okay. Right.
Yeah.
A lot of this is just in marketing or in life in general. A lot of it's like building up the reps, like getting the practice and the experience in. And if you never get started, you're never going to get that experience. So that's a really, really critical factor. I'd say
Yeah.
if there's one secret that I've learned on my journey, it's that you're supposed to take action more than you think you need to take action. That's like the critical component that people tend to miss.
Yeah, 100%. And then keep taking that action, being consistent with it, and just keep continually showing up. Which is why we within Geek Out help people to figure out like how to make their business align with them, and doing something that you love showing up to every day, and it's constructed in a way where you're not overwhelmed and like totally miserable showing up to what you do every day. That helps in showing up and creating content and being consistent in publishing, which is the more important part of YouTube, is just being consistent. More so than really anything. I think Mark agrees. Okay, so I'm going to ask you some like tactical things now, that just like, we'll do a full disclosure here, depending on when you're watching this video, if it's today or if it's like 10 years from now. These things may or may not actually be like the recommended thing anymore. But as of right now, these are the answers. So let's talk a bit about, okay, I talked about video length. So and maybe there's not really an answer to this, so I'm curious to know what you say. When we're talking about, like, we call it long form content, but really we just mean not 60-second videos on shorts. So anything longer than 60 seconds is probably what we call long form now, right?
Yeah.
In our space, where primarily who we're working with and who we're talking to right now, which are like digital marketers, they have digital products. What would be your recommendation for video length if you have one?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And that's something I hear a lot too, is how long do my videos need to be? And there's a lot of different schools of thought on that. And my answer at this point tends to be one that's more aligned with copywriting, which is it needs to be as long as it needs to be.
Yeah.
And so ideally, if you want an actual target, I would shoot for around 8 to 10 minutes, right? That's going to probably be long enough to where you can get your information out there, and then not too long to where it just kind of feels like it's dragging. But I think one thing I tend to see is if you say, okay, well, make sure your videos are 8 to 10 minutes long. The thing that you absolutely don't want to do is to just use a lot of filler to get from maybe like a video that's supposed to be like 3 to 4 minutes of solid information up to an 8 to 10 minute mark. And that's absolutely not going to be helpful for you. Like you want to make sure that your videos are packed with value and that you're holding people's attention. Because really YouTube is looking at that retention more than anything. They're not looking necessarily at how long your total video is. They're looking at how long people stay on that video and how much they consume that content. And so really, yeah, so 8 to 10 minutes is kind of that sweet spot that I try to shoot for. But if it goes over that, or if it's less than that, it's not a huge deal.
So would you say then, could the strategy be, assuming you could make a video, like let's say I'm thinking of a topic, I can go make some content on this topic, and I could make it an 8 to 10 minute video that's engaging and not full of filler, and it's good content, but I could also pare it down and do like a 4-minute version of it, based on the YouTube algorithm of and rewarding videos for if people can stay longer on them. Would it actually be better for me to make the 4-minute version, assuming that, like, okay, probably going to have more people watch a majority of the 4-minute video versus the majority of people watching the 10-minute video? Do you know what I'm trying to ask?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've seen it go both ways. I've made short videos where the percentage of view time was about the same as a longer video was. So
Okay.
like, well, if I had made it longer, it would have been better, because then they may have stayed longer. I mean, you start playing these games with yourself of like, what you like, the what ifs, right? What if I made it longer? What if I made it shorter? I will say though, one thing that YouTube does like to see is when people, viewers watch multiple videos. So if you have a way of making, like a series of videos that you could put into one video that's like 10, 15 minutes long, or you could really chunk it out into 3 or 4 videos, 100%, I would recommend trying the 3 or 4 videos and then leading people through those videos to the next one, because that's a really, really good indicator for YouTube that your content's really good, because people are not only just consuming the one video, but they're going to the next video and possibly the next video and the next. And so that's a really, really good indicator for the algorithm. So
awesome.
Yeah. And I would test it too. Like you might release 2 videos. You might do one that's longer and you might do one that's shorter, if you're not quite sure which format to pick, if you feel like you can do both or either. And then just see which one performs the best, right? Because you can also hit different pockets of people in terms of your audience. Maybe they like consuming a little bit more content. Maybe they like a little bit more information, but you're going to also have people that like to just kind of get the Cliffs Notes, and they're fine with that. Like they'd rather have a shorter version of the content. So testing is very important too.
Yeah. So along the lines of testing, okay, I mentioned that we have some videos on our channel that are lengthy and not like good lengthy. It's like we're screen sharing and there's silent moments where we're just trying to figure out tech, and it's messy and not edited at all. It would it's been a while since I've looked at them. I doubt that they're getting views. I doubt that they're performing well at all. So in that situation where you have content on your channel where you're like, this bombed, this is not good content, does it matter if we leave it there? Maybe somebody will find it and enjoy it, or is it hurting, and should we actually like unlist it or like delete it?
Yeah, great questions. So there's theories on that one too. So what I would say is really look at your content and see if it's really still serving a purpose. If it's not getting a lot of views, maybe it's just one of those topics that is still valuable. Like the content's still good, but people just aren't finding it for whatever reason. Because you might have pockets of cycles where people might find your video in 6 months to a year, and it still might be if it's still going to be valuable at that time, I'd go ahead and leave it up. But if it's something that you're just not happy with, maybe you've done some kind of a software evaluation, or you're like ClickFunnels 2.0, I know it's changed a lot since it.
We've got a lot of those videos too that we should probably.
Yeah. So if the tech is outdated, for sure, I would not leave those up there, because you're not really helping them at that point. You're doing the opposite, right? So what I would do in those cases is I would go ahead and unlist the video. I wouldn't delete it. I would just unlist it. That way you still have all of your statistics in place for that video. You know how it performed, and you can kind of go back to it if you want to in the future. If you delete it, then you're not going to have any of that information. So I always recommend just to unlist it, make it private. And it's always good to kind of go through your channel every once in a while too, once you've had it for a while, just to kind of go through like a pruning of your content. So if you see things that aren't performing anymore and it's not really important that it's still up there, or if your channel has changed direction, like if you've pivoted the content on your channel, which is a whole other topic, then you can delist a lot of videos that maybe aren't relevant to what you're currently trying to do with your channel. And that can be helpful too.
Okay. That's actually super helpful for us. I think that we probably have a lot of videos that we could probably unlist because of that reason, because we started making content 2 years ago and we didn't really know the direction we were going to go. And I'm sure that there might be some of you watching right now that you're like in that same situation where you're like, I started making content, but like I have pivoted a totally different direction and this stuff isn't even relevant. It's not even the people that I want to be attracting anymore. And that's great advice and good permission for us to go do that. Like it's okay to do that, to unlist things. It's more helpful for the channel than hurting the channel if you're taking, unlisting things. Okay, so back to a little bit more tactical, because we're talking about like, okay, how do we drive people into our community, which primarily like I guess let's talk about call to actions here in a moment, because that's going to be important. But I have another question I want to ask you first. It's more about the video stuff. So I recently heard the advice, and I don't know if you've heard this before. I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. I recently heard someone talk about their strategy where they will publish a video to YouTube, and for like a week, or maybe a little bit more than a week, for every 48 hours for like 2 or 3 cycles, they will replace the thumbnail on that video to see which one performs better.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something you've seen that you do, that you would recommend? Does it make that big of a difference? What are your thoughts on that strategy?
Sure. Yeah. So my default answer is going to be, make sure that you're not sacrificing tweaking old videos for the sake of not creating new content, right? So you always want to be creating the new content. Don't think that you're going back and kind of changing things up on things that didn't perform the way you thought they would, by changing the thumbnails or the titles or whatever. That's going to make a huge difference. I've never seen it make a really, really big difference in my experience. So just make sure you're not making that mistake. But it has helped in the times that I have changed thumbnails. So like if I can see a video that's performing in a certain way, that since I've got enough data on my channel now, I know how videos perform. If I see that, like, for example, my click-through rate isn't very good, then I can go out and I will change the thumbnail for that video, and that can definitely be helpful. I will caution though against, changing your thumbnail out too quickly. I would make sure that you're leaving your video out there for, a week or 2 is kind of my rule of thumb, just to see how it performs. And then swapping it out and seeing if you can improve it. I'd also recommend not doing it manually. Like there's tools that you can use to do A/B testing for thumbnails.
Okay.
Well, actually, there's only one tool that I'm aware of, which is TubeBuddy. And then what it will do is it will cycle through your original thumbnail and then your alternate thumbnail every 24 hours. And it will collect the data, and it will tell you, you've got a couple options with it right now. You can either tell it to run for a certain number of days, which I think it's 14 days is the default, or until there's enough statistical significance for it to pick a winner. And so that can be really interesting to see, because I have had times when I've gone through that exercise and like doubled my click-through rate on a thumbnail, just because it was a different thumbnail. Like the one that I picked originally, I thought was good, but everyone else didn't. So changing it was definitely helpful. And that's kind of the same thing too with when it comes to like video retention and things like that. Like you can go in and you can edit out parts of your video if people are if you see people dropping off on your video. I've done that before too. I've gone back in and kind of cut out a section if it really wasn't relevant. Like if it still made sense without that in there, then I would go in and cut that out. And that seems to help a little bit too, because then the retention starts to go up. People don't leave. And so, yeah, there's a lot of things you can do after you publish to make sure you're maximizing the effectiveness of your content. But it can be one of those things that you can spend a lot of time on. That's not going to help you a super, super huge amount. Other than, like if you were creating new content, your time would be better spent that way.
Just creating. And you mentioned earlier about like, test separate videos, make like you were just talking about, maybe you cut a chunk out. If you kind of knew that maybe I should leave that minute or 2 out of the video, you could like make a new version of it. Yep. Actually, here's another question. So if I were to do that, I think that I've read somewhere, does YouTube penalize you if you have almost identical videos? Like it can tell, right? Like if I have like a 10-minute video and I publish that. And then I go and cut out like maybe 3 minutes of it, but the rest is identical, like delivered exactly, like it's literally the same file. And I just cut out a chunk and I publish that. Do you know if that's like a problem?
I've heard that. I haven't. I can't say that I know that is a fact from experience though. So
Okay.
like,
Okay.
I mean, obviously
Possibly.
Google and YouTube will index everything. So like,
Yeah.
I'm sure if you duplicate a video, it knows, right, that you
Yeah.
duplicated it because it just has all that data. But at the same time, at the end of the day, YouTube's goal is to keep people on their platform and to make sure people are happy with the content that they're showing everyone.
Hmm.
And so if you publish if an identical video, excuse me, or mainly identical video that is performing pretty well, I cannot see why YouTube would say, "Oh, no, I know this is performing well, but you copied it for the most part, so no, we're not going to let you do that." Like that doesn't make good business sense, right? So I would think that it kind of goes back to testing it. I don't have a hard or strong opinion on that either
Okay.
way, but just kind of like thinking about it, I could see like if a short video does perform really well, I don't see why YouTube would penalize that just because
Yeah.
you've kind of tweaked it a little bit. And certainly like
Okay.
don't copy someone else's video and put it on
Yeah.
your channel. They 100% know that and they will come after you for that. But if it's on your own channel and you're doing that, I don't know. I would test it and see.
Okay. Okay. So we talked a lot about like tactics around actually like making the content and putting your videos together and on all the YouTube stuff. And the reason why I wanted to ask Mark these questions is because, okay, the primary goal is to get people to see your videos, to engage with them, to know, like, and trust us. And then we should have a call to action to move them to somewhere else. I know there's a lot of YouTubers out there that they're growing their followers and their subscribers, and they're creating communities on YouTube, and then like the paid thing that people can set up, like I don't even know what that's called. What's it called? Where like a lot of YouTubers, like they have this paid subscription
Yeah,
community
it's like
that a lot of them use from YouTube.
yeah.
But that's not serving us because we need to move them to the next step. So the next step, like I mentioned earlier, is to either for the strategy that we do, and actually pulled it. I saved the graphic while Mark was talking. So unfortunately it hides our faces, but you can see YouTube over there on the left. And we need to move them. Actually, this graphic is slightly outdated, but we want to move them into a nurture space. So it's either going to be the Facebook group or your email list. And let me pull that back up. So let's talk, if that's our strategy and you're going to pick like one or the other to start off, if you're new and you're just now creating your channel and you're just creating a nurture space, do you have any advice or best practices around putting call to actions in videos and also like not in videos or also in like descriptions? Like what's the best practice around that you've seen lately working?
Yeah. So calls to action are interesting. I think for sure you want to make sure you have a link to whatever you want them to do in the description of the video, right? You want to make it as easy as possible. So once they make the decision to take the next step with you, they can do it without a lot of friction and issues. So make sure you have those links in your description. Make sure it's targeted. Like you only have one primary call to action. You can have some other calls to actions in there, but make sure like you have a goal for your video as to what the intent is for the video. And then that call to action or that link is the main one that people would find in your video description as well. Like you can have things like, find me on social media and things like that in your description
Mhm.
too. But make sure that main call to action is at the top. And then as far as the call, yeah, go
Sorry,
ahead.
would you also, because we do a lot of, like you mentioned, like we want them to keep watching more videos. So would you also include, so you've got your main call to action, but then have some like links to other videos in there too? I've
Yeah.
seen that where you can have links to other videos. That's not like getting too much.
No, it's not.
Okay.
You can totally do that. I would like I have a kind of a framework that I use for my descriptions to where you can break that out and say, other videos you might be interested in and put links in your description that way. I
Okay.
also do at the end of the video, I say, like if people reach all the way to the end of the video, like they haven't clicked off to something else or whatever, I also have a call to action that I usually include that says, check out this other video here, or maybe not, that would be like the generic call to action for the next video. Or you could say something like, well, I have another video talking about this subject, which could be like the next problem here that you can watch, and then link to that directly. Because if they've made it 100% through, then they might be just more interested in consuming your content or trying to find that next answer. So make sure you're including that. But when it comes to like main call to action to get them off the platform to take some kind of an action, whether it's, join the community, or if like, affiliate marketers will link people like to Amazon or whatever, make sure you're talking about that in the video, right? And there's different schools of thought as to when you talk about that, right? So some people say, we'll talk about it in the beginning because most people don't stay to the end. But I tend to like to put mine towards the end of the video, like once most of the content is actually talked about and done, because you've given the value that they're looking for in that video. And that really should be the priority with the content you're making for YouTube and for anything really. And so your call to action, in my opinion, should be after that. And then it really should just be an invitation, right? So say if you like this content that I've put together, if you like to, grow more or join our community or whatever, just a really, really basic, clear call to action. Doesn't have to be fancy. Doesn't have to feel like you're using any like psychological tricks or anything like that. Just making sure you're inviting people to the next step. There's going to be a certain percentage of people that will click on that link that you've included in the description and then do whatever it is you're asking them to do. So make sure you make it simple and easy. Like it shouldn't be one of these things that like you overthink, you're overcomplicated. It's really a simple thing.
Yeah. Okay. Great advice. One of the things that I've seen right before we wrap up here, I've seen lately, like a lot of people are moving toward the direction. We used to have like a lot of videos for a period of time where like in every single video, it was like, subscribe, click the bell, like do this thing, do these other things. Like there's a lot of call to actions.
Right.
And it's like, okay, I think that everybody knows by now that they can subscribe if they want to. And so we tend to leave that type of stuff out of our content. And that's probably more from the advice that I've seen other people give recently. And just focusing on that main call to action, or like go watch the next video. Is kind of what we do. So it sounds like that's in line with your thinking as well.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, I wouldn't I wouldn't put too many instructions in the video for sure. Yeah.
Oh, I can't keep up with all the things that you're asking me to do.
Yeah. Subscribe to the channel and then hit the bell for notifications and then like it and then make sure you comment and then it's
the comment flow. I know we're all wanting engagement, but more importantly, we want to not annoy them. We need them to watch the content.
Yeah, you definitely need to have a plan. Like what is the call to action, the primary call to action you want someone to take when they watch that specific video that you're making? Is it join the community? Is the primary call to action really watching the next video? Because it could be, right? Especially if you have a series of videos, that could be the main call to action. But make sure that's like known when you go into it, and then that tends to be helpful.
Yeah. Okay. So with that said, I'm going to give a call to action. If you guys have liked this video and you want more content like this, or you want to dive into more of what I was talking about earlier with the Geek Linchpin and how we help people to execute this in their business, you can go to geekoutcommunity.com and that'll take you to where you can join our Facebook community. That is where we hang out. We do a lot of stuff over there. So that would be the next place that you want to go from this video if you want to join our community, or I'm sure there will be somewhere on the screen to go watch some other video. And then Mark, where can people find you and connect with you if they want to come learn more about YouTube and your ways of executing on YouTube?
Sure. So one way you can do that is by joining the Geek Out community. So I'm actively engaged in that. So highly recommend that you do that. Another way is you can find me on social media. I'm on most of the platforms as Real Mark Bell. It's actually pronounced Bell. There's an A in it. It's a little bit weird. It's not great from a marketing perspective, but it is what it is. So if you find Real Mark Bell, I'm on Instagram, I'm on YouTube. And then also if you're looking to do like really in-depth work with someone on YouTube that has experience, you can always book a call with me if you like, and just go to markyourcall.com and then you can book some time with me there.
Awesome. And we'll put all of those things in the description. Amazing. Okay. Thank you so much, Mark, for joining us today. And yes, Mark is active in our community. And he even does like workshops and Q&A in our program. So if you're interested in that, you can learn more about that in the community as well. So thank you for joining us. We will see you guys next time. Bye.
Bye.